All right, Vinod sir, I think we are ready to start.
Sure, sir. You can start.
Yeah. So, very good evening to all of you who are joining us from across the country. Welcome to this third talk in the series of talks sponsored by the Atal Incubation Center at Dayanand Sagar University, right? Which is one of the premier incubators for innovative ideas. Right? They're a team of excellent resources who can help you set up your organization, who can help you set up, as you are going about with your idea, right? They can connect you to the kind of relevant mentors, right? So in the past couple of discussions that we have had, we have looked at the journey of an early stage entrepreneur. Where does an idea come from? How does the idea take shape and how does it evolve, right? We took a look at various aspects of the product design themselves, right? In today's discussion, we are going to focus on essentially structured innovation design, because in many cases, while we think about developing our ideas into products, unless there is a formal process or a method to doing that, it is very difficult to come up with a solution upfront. Right, so that's what we are going to look at in today's discussion. We have the CEO of Atal Incubation Center at DSU, Mr. Vinod Shankar, with us, right, who will be able to take questions regarding the incubation process as well. During the talk, you can also put in your comments on the YouTube live stream. Those of you who are on our WhatsApp group, right, can also post in your questions over there as well. And we'll try to take in as many questions as possible, right? My name is Atanu. I'm the founder of Capsule Labs. I am an entrepreneur myself, looking at creating value for higher education institutes. Right. And over the last almost 2 decades, I've been involved with various startups across the world and looking at, or rather hearing a lot of pitches from different young innovators, finding out what works in their solutions and what doesn't, mentoring them, advising them in terms of how to shape their organization, how to focus their energies on what matters the most in a particular environment, right? So for those of you who want to join us on the WhatsApp platform, right, I would strongly encourage that you just go ahead, scan the code, and you will be part of the chat group, right, where you can ask follow-up questions either today or at a later point. Whenever your question arises, you can definitely take a look at that, right? So I'm going to keep it up on the screen for a couple of moments while we wait on a few more people to join the stream. Right, hope you're all getting settled in. So, in many cases, let's start off with doing business itself, right? As all of you who are part of the talk today, who are part of the discussion today, are very much aware that a business is a legal entity, right? A business, is, of course, it's like any other citizen in the country. A business has its own set of compliances, a set of documents that identify a business uniquely, right? Whether it is the company identification number or its taxation numbers, right? There are multiple privileges that are granted to a business as it registers with the various compliance forums across the country, right? Now, a business is a legal entity, and the purpose of a business essentially is to maximize the shareholder profits, right? So we are all very clear on that part, right? This is a pretty well-established concept. But how does the business maximize shareholder profits, right? does that by delivering some value to its target customers. It has to deliver value in some shape or form. And really the question that comes up over here is, how do you deliver value to your customers, right? Now, typically, when you talk about delivering value, the most common ways for delivering value is either as a product or as a service, right? Naturally, it is either a goods or a service. So, these words you will be hearing very often, right? So the vehicle for delivering value to an end customer is either in a packaged form, which is more of a product, or something that can be experienced, which is more of a services form, right? And we may think of products and services as something complementary to each other. So if we look at the product versus services scenario, in many cases, it is very easy to figure out or differentiate between what is a product and what is a service, right? So, it's very easy, for example, to say that, well, a pair of scissors is a product, whereas hair cutting is a service, right? A salon is offering a service, right? So very easy to differentiate between what is a product and what is a service, right? For example, a vehicle, right? A vehicle is a product, whereas a cab is a service, right? Very relatively easy to distinguish over there as well, right? A smartwatch. A smartwatch is a product. Healthcare is a service. Fitness tracking, personalized healthcare, right? These are services, right? So it's very easy to kind of differentiate between what is a product and what is a service, right? How do we differentiate between them? Well, products are typically tangible, right? They're tangible as in they can be seen, they can be touched, they can be felt, whereas services are something that is experienced while it is being delivered, right? If I look at the production of both of these value delivering vehicles, right? In terms of products, products typically undergo a production method, right? So typically they are mass manufactured, right? Whereas services typically uses skilled labor, right? Experienced labor. So it's the value of that experience that is coming in, right? Generally, when we think of a product, we think about, a product is mass manufactured according to some specification, right? So products are typically not customized, whereas a service is typically, or it is generally customized as per the customer expectations, right? So in terms of a product, the way a product is delivered is typically as a physical package, right? It can be sent over, it can be sent as a parcel, it can be sold over a counter, right? So this is how a product is delivered as a physical package, whereas a service is typically delivered through interactions, right? If you are calling up a call center, right, you are interacting with an IVR or a chatbot, right? So these are interactions that you are doing with a representative, right? If you're going to get your you're going to a salon, right? You're going to typically interact with the people there. If you're going to a restaurant, you're going to ask your waiter to take a request. The cook will cook something customized for your palate, right? So you can get that customization done. So typically, services are delivered through interactions, right? In case of products, right, there is a definite transfer of ownership, right? A product used to belong to somebody else until you bought it. And once you bought it, the ownership has been transferred to you, right? So there's a change in the custody of ownership, right? And services, on the other hand, typically there is a transfer of benefits that you get, right? One of the best, there are some fuzzy spots over here, and I'll cover that in a little bit, right? What happens when you are renting something? Is there a transfer of ownership? Well, I can definitely argue that there is a temporary transfer of ownership while you're using something, right? typically the pricing model of a product is based on its manufacturing cost and its distribution costs, right? How much did it cost? How much did the raw materials cost? How much did it cost in terms of labor to produce that particular product? And then the entire the distribution chain, right? Coming in from the factory to the warehouses, to the distributors, to the retailers, and finally you being able to buy it, right? So pricing is typically takes into account the manufacturing cost and the distribution cost of the entire supply chain, right? Whereas services are based on time and experience of provider, right? If you are going for legal service, you may be billed by the hour, right? Or you may be billed on a specific activity that the service provider does performs for you, for a particular draft that they create for you, right? It's typically pricing goes up if you're going to a more experienced provider, right? Or if the activity requires more time, right? So while it is relatively easy to differentiate between products and services, and we tend to think of them as products versus services, what is happening now is there is a lot of intermingling that is happening, right? So it's in many cases, it may not be possible to actually say whether something is a product or a service, and that is the nature of interdisciplinary products and services that we are seeing today. So rather than calling it products versus services, right, why not call it products and services, right? And the moment we call it products and services, we can look at it as, there are several examples of this where there are a bunch of services that are created around the product. For example, streaming services, right? Something like a Netflix or a Hulu or a Amazon Prime, right? Or a Disney Hotstar. So when you think about this streaming service, you get two parts. There is definitely content that you are seeing, right? The content may be produced. For example, Netflix produces a lot of content itself. It produces a lot of movies. It produces a lot of mini series, right? So there is content that is being produced, as well as the viewing experience that it is giving you, that it is providing to you, right? So streaming services are giving you a product and a service, right? Same with, say, for example, your internet service provider, right? Your internet service provider gives you the connectivity infrastructure. And when I say the connectivity infrastructure, it means all the cables and everything that goes in terms of providing internet connectivity to your home. And along with that, it also gives you the customer premise equipments, right? The modem that gets installed in your home, right? And along with that, it gives you that internet connectivity as well, right? It gives you the service that gets billed on a month-to-month basis, right? So it's giving you infrastructure as well as connectivity. Right? Let me take another example, right? Many of you who are joining us today are in colleges, right? Or you may have recently graduated, right? So in terms of a higher education institute, right? So while even that is selling a product, right? A program, when a product is delivered, you get a curriculum, you get the content that is delivered, as well as a person who comes in and does the curriculum delivery, right? Which is the service part of it, right? So you get the content, and which is the product, and you get the service as well, right? So even higher education institutes, they are getting into they are offering a product, they are delivering value by offering you a product or a service, right? Other applications like a car leasing or a car sharing application, right? Where you get a vehicle, but along with that, you also get services like on-road assistance, emergency assistance, annual checkups, things like that. So these are a bunch of services that are created around a particular product, right? So it's very much possible that in many cases, what you will see is there are services that are built around a product, and in many cases, there are services are standardized to create a product out of them, right? So when we talk about delivering value, right, we definitely see that services can be standardized and packaged as products, right? For example, healthcare, right? Healthcare, rather than having a service-based model, which is, you go in, you have a consultation fees for the doctor. Instead of that, many hospitals will offer, say, for example, a cataract package, right? Which would include whatever costs are involved in terms of delivering an average, cataract operation service, right? So that gets packaged as a product, right? And similarly, on the other side of the mirror, what you get is products that can have layers of customization service as well, right? So, for example, think about a printer, right? A printer itself is a product, but in many cases, in many corporate houses, what you will find is the printer is offered as a service, right? So the printer provider typically comes in and installs a printer on the floor, and they are responsible for refilling the paper in the printer, the ink in the printer, making sure that the printer is working fine. And if there are any problems with the printer, they'll get the printer replaced, right? But how they charge you? They charge you based on number of pages that are printed, right? So that's how you can take a product and create a service around it, right? So that's important to understand, that the boundaries between what really is a product and what really is a service can blur, and is actually blurring significantly these days, right? Because we are seeing many apps that are being created, which tend to bring in multiple services right to your mobile phone, right? And these apps are themselves products, right? So the line between where a product ends and where its services begin, right, are blurring in the current set of companies that we are seeing, right? Now, one way to think about building one of these products or services is what we call is generics, right, or generic products, right? And when we think about generic products, right, we typically look at, the market is growing. There are, say, for example, biscuits, right? Or everybody understands what a biscuit is. So if my major competitors are able to sell more biscuit year on year, it typically means that the market size itself is growing and more people are buying biscuits, right? So in this case, when the market itself grows, it is possible to introduce generics into the market, right? Which looks and feels like any other product in the same category that is available, right? So generic products, generic products typically do not need a lot of innovation. It needs some capital expenses because you need to buy some equipment that will help you make that particular product, right? But growing markets typically support this kind of generic products, right? But what are the pros and cons of using these generic products, right? Well, the pros is that it's got limited R&D costs, because there are many products in the market, and even the suppliers, they know how the product is built, what to think about the particular product, right? There's no additional R&D that is required. You know who the customers are, you know who the suppliers are, right? So it's relatively easy to come to market, right? To bring the product to market, right? But the cons of building a generic product is that while it is easy for you to get into the market, it is equally easy for somebody else to come into the market as well, right? So there is always going to be a pricing pressure on the product that you are launching, right? And market leaders can can control the pricing, right? They can control the pricing and the distribution, and can affect your margins significantly, right? So you do not really have much of a pricing leverage when you are introducing a generic in the market, right? Your best hope is that larger companies have already spent marketing dollars in terms of creating the market, letting people know that this product is available, so you don't have to incur as much costs. Your costs of selling a product is pretty much pretty much close to its manufacturing costs, right? So the lower you can get your manufacturing costs, the better are your chances of getting into the market, right? But you cannot control the pricing over there, right? So generics, it's definitely one strategy to create a product and bring it into the market, right? And we see this strategy being used effectively in the pharmaceutical industry, right? India is in fact one of the largest producer of generic active pharmaceutical ingredients in the world, right? So that's definitely an area to look at. But if you are an innovator, you may not be happy with this, right? You may not be happy with just creating another product like other products that are available in the market. You may want to go a little further, right? You may start thinking about how to package your solution, right? And in doing so, this is where your innovation comes out. This is where your differentiators start to come out in your product offering, right? So let me take the example of a smart car. Let me take the example of a car for that matter, right? And while we think of a car as the epitome of a product where we have gone through all the assembly line to build a product, right? But in many cases, what we are seeing is with the introduction of the Tesla, right, of vehicles like that, other EV vehicles, the car itself is also becoming a point of consumption of various services, right? So if I look at a car, right, what kind of digital services can I create around that car, right? And there are a lot of opportunities that come up, right? Give it a moment to think about, what kind of services can be consumed within that vehicle itself, right? Well, there are quite a few, right? Just from the examples that I came up, right? That I'm showing you, there are quite a few ways of doing that. Right, you could create some location services, right, which tell the car about where to go, so GPS navigation kind of services, right? You could provide a parking service, right? You could, if it's an electric vehicle, you could provide a charging service, right, where telling the drivers where the next parking spot is, or where the next charging spot is, or where the next amenities are available, right? You could provide accident notification and traffic rerouting services, right? So there's a bunch of location-based services that you could be creating. You could be creating compliance services, right? Whether the car is paying the right toll when it goes through a particular tolling booth, right? Whether the car is overspeeding, whether it has failed any of its registrations or pollution control mechanisms, right? You can look at a license plate and provide this service not only to the car provider, you can actually provide this information to the authorities as well, right? So it's a bunch of compliance services that could be created for toll booth operators, for traffic controllers and people like that, right? So not only the driver, but also a larger ecosystem, products can be created for them. Right? You can create a bunch of infotainment services, because while one person is driving, and in autonomous vehicles, nobody could be driving. In such cases, why not improve on the infotainment capabilities of the vehicle, right? Including heads-up displays, including entertainment on demand. Ola, for a while, it started to think about how to play serials and movies in the back seat, right, without distracting the driver, and seeing if that could be a potential way to monetize content as well, right? And there are completely new monetization services as well, right? Whether you are looking at usage-based insurance, right? So every time a car fills up gas, or it passes through a toll booth, right? You can charge it insurance based on a particular road segment that it travels on, right? right? You can look at energy monetization. If there is a differential pricing between daytime energy costs and nighttime energy costs, right? You could look at energy monetization by charging the vehicle at night and using that power during the day, right? Or parking space monetization, right? Places where if somebody has an available parking slot at their home when their vehicle has gone out to the office, can that be monetized, right? So there's a whole bunch of digital services that can be created around even something as as product as it gets, right? Even then you can create a bunch of services around it, especially with vehicles that are integrated onto the internet, right? Especially with vehicles where there is an existing, that comes with say Bluetooth connectivity, that can come with 5G or 6G connectivity, right? So you can imagine about these services, right? But when you are thinking about what kind of services to provide to the vehicle, right? We have not gone into a very underlying question of what was the purpose of the rider, right? We did not empathize with the rider in terms of why were they riding in the first place, right? Were they in a rush? Right? Were they going to meet somebody near and dear? Right? Were they going in for an exam? Right? So there are other aspects. We did not get into trying to understand why that ride was happening in the first place. Right? And this is where I think the heart of today's discussion lies. Right? How do you think about a solution? How do you create a solution? How do you imagine a solution, right? In a structured way, right? And personally, I believe that there are quite a few approaches, but the way I think about it is that there are two broad approaches I like to think about when we imagine solutions or when we create innovation, right? The first part is what I call is a very critical thought process, right? Let me give you the example of artwork, which is hyperrealism, right? Trying to represent, trying to meet specifications or represent real life as closely as possible. And this is more of a critical approach towards imagining a solution, right? Whereas the other approach, right, which is on the other end of the spectrum, is more of abstract, more in the abstract. It's more of a creative solution, right? The first category of solutions meets specifications. If I were in a business and if I was in a business where I was responding to a request for a proposal, my solution would have to meet the specifications that were spelled out in the RFP, in the requirements, right? So I will have to design something just around that, and I will be creative in terms of simplifying the architecture at most, right? Whereas new products, when they come out, they have to take a more creative solution. They have to look at the underlying need for a particular solution, right? Who are the people who are using it? Why are they using that particular product? Or why do they need that problem to be solved, right? And in my experience, what I have observed is what works for good products is when you can probably balance between the functionality and the empathy part of it, right? Where there is a realism, where there are specifications that are met, as well as it looks after the needs of the customer, right? iPhone, of course, is a great example of such a product, right? Not only is it a robust device that has, probably one of the best specifications that are out there, right? It's fully functional. It addresses all the functional issues, but at the same time, it helps you. The vision with which that iPhone was created was to help you do your work better. And it's almost like a no stops barred kind of an approach, where there has been extensive consumer research to understand understand what would make things easier for you, right? And right from the iconic curved edges to its styling to its design language, all of them are reflective of the customer empathy process that they have gone through. Right? Because in many cases, you may be making the same product, but the same product could be sold to different consumer segments. And each of these consumer segments would have a very, very different priority to look into, right? They may have a very different set of expectations from the same product, right? To give you a more concrete example, let me perhaps take the example of smart light. Right. Today we are in the age of IoT, so everything's smart, everything is connected. For somebody who is manufacturing an LED, right, they are making a light, and it is possible to create an IoT infrastructure around an LED so that I can control when it comes on, I can control when it goes off, I can control its dimness, I can control its color tonality and things like that. Right. So that gives us into creating smart lights, right? But even when we think about smart lighting, right, I really need to start understanding who my customer is, right? Who am I going to sell this particular product to? And based on my customer, the requirements may change significantly. And what do I mean by that? Well, say for example, I want to tap into the consumer segment, right? You and me, right? Smart lights for home, right? Smart lights for home, again, is primarily meant for comfort and convenience, right? What it does is I don't have to get up from the bed again, right? I can switch it off from my mobile phone, or I can ask Alexa or Siri or Google Home to switch off that light. So that's comfort and convenience. I want to set up some mood lights, right? It's comfort and convenience, right? Even here, when I try to sub-segment this particular category and perhaps look at maybe say smart lighting for geriatric, for the older population, right? A younger population may say that, the moment how responsive the app is, that the smart light is, if I issue the command, the light should go off immediately, or the light should come on immediately, right? But for a more elderly population, a light coming on abruptly may actually be a overwhelming stimuli, right? So for a geriatric population, we might want to redesign the smart lighting app to actually dim in or fade out, right? So you have to talk to the customer. We have to understand what the customer, how the customer is going to use that particular product, right? Even though at the heart of the product is still an LED light, the expectation of the customer changes based on who they are and why they need it, right? Let me give you another example over here, right? If an enterprise were to invest in smart lighting, right, for, let's say, for smart offices, right, or for a factory floor, the requirements are going to be very different, right? For an enterprise, it might be about cost optimization. Can I switch off lights if people are not present, right? Can I switch off lights, from 11 o'clock to 5 o'clock in the morning, right? So this is where the solution saves money, right? It's looked at from a return on investment perspective, right? What is the energy cost of somebody forgetting to switch off the lights versus what can I do with it if I create an integrated solution that allows me to manage the office lighting, right? If it is a factory floor, the main priority could be about how much can I complement natural light and ensure that the factory floor meets the requisite light levels, right? Same goes for probably when I'm going to install, say, floodlights in a stadium, right? The conditions should become playable, right? the government, right? If the government wants to install, say, for example, smart street lights, which can be run on a schedule, which can be controlled from far, right? Which can be remotely controlled, where I can get data about whatever is happening, the energy consumption of the particular street lamp. The main purpose for a citizen project is citizen safety. If there is nobody walking under a street light, does keeping the street light serve any purpose? Right? So it's trying to get to the heart of that problem, right? And as long as I can still keep the safety, I can still meet the citizen safety criteria, I can still have the street lights, I can still have them on, and I can I can have a smart solution for that. It is still LEDs. The underlying technology is still LEDs, and LEDs that are controlled by an IoT connected network. But the application but the application is changing. The form of the application is changing. The features and functionalities in my apps are going to change based on who is going to use it, right? If I'm using, say, smart lighting for task lighting, right, where the light is used for a specific purpose, and say, for example, I have a greenhouse and I'm using smart lighting to emit a particular wavelength of green light so that my yields are better, right? So in that case, yield maximization becomes the core priority for the product, right? So even though all of them are examples of smart lighting applications, the consumer segment makes a lot of difference in terms of how that solution is implemented, right? And this is where we need to look at, both the critical design thinking, the critical thinking process, the critical, meeting the specification kind of a thought process. But along with that, this is where innovation design has led us into understanding more creative ways of thinking about the solution, right? This is where the creative and the design thinking process comes in, right? The design thinking process is itself a very it's a very well understood process. It's a very formal process that we go into. But even if you are not getting into a design thinking methodology all the time, there are aspects from the design thinking process that can be absorbed and used for ideating about new features or functionalities, which can become the key differentiator in your product. So, what's the formal process? What does the formal process look like? Well, the formal process is a 5-step process, actually a 6-step process. So the first step starts off with empathizing, right? With trying to put yourself in the shoes of the customer and trying to think about under what circumstances would the customer use your product, right? What mood are they in when they are using your product, right? I'll come back to this in a little bit and elaborate on what the empathize process is about. But overall, if I look at the design thinking process, right, you have the empathize stage where we try to understand what the steps the consumer will go through or the customer will go through, what are they thinking when they are using the particular product, right, and essentially creating empathy maps out of it to define broad contours of what we know about the solution and what we do not know, right? What were our initial assumptions and which assumptions would need to change based on the interactions that we may have had with the consumers themselves, right? And based on this, we start looking at what are different ways of solving that problem, right? And there can be multiple ways to ideate, right? Whether it is brainstorming or reverse brainstorming or 5 whys, we'll cut into those. But essentially, trying out as many different approaches, right, without crossing them out. First, let us ideate and look at what are the different ways of solving that need, right? It is very much possible that the initial specification that we started off with may not be the right solution, right? There could be other approaches which are more cost effective, right? There could be other approaches that we have not thought about when we were looking at things only purely from an analytical point of view, or purely from a critical perspective, right? Ideating gives us some good ideas. I mean, of course, ideating will give us some ideas, and these ideas tend to create clusters, right? These ideas can be thought of as, groups of approaches, essentially, and those groups of approaches can now be it can now be brought together in terms of creating prototypes, right? In terms of creating whether it is a high-level design or whether it is a 3D model, right? So some kind of a touch and feel of from what we thought the consumer wanted to actually getting to know what the consumer wants, to look at different ways of providing a solution for the consumers, and finally creating something to touch and feel, to experience the same kind of roadmap or the same kind of process that an end consumer would go through. And then, of course, we have to go out and test it with the real world, right? If this is really something that they that would satisfy their criteria, right? And in the process, there is a 6th step of implementation. I'll come to that in a little bit. Right. So, in order to empathize itself, let me break that step up a little bit, because we have multiple tools at our disposal in order to do this kind of to kind of understand and empathize with the customers, right? Probably the easiest and the simplest one that we kind of tend to hear about is something called the beginner's mindset, right? Start off assuming that you know nothing about the particular product or how that product is going to get used, right? So with that assumption, you essentially start off with a beginner's mindset. You think that you do not know how to use your own product. Then how would you go about it, right? Is it naively acceptable? If you're thinking about a mobile app, right? Would somebody who did not know anything about the context of the mobile app still be able to figure their way around, right? Or are they going to, when they go into the app, what are the first things that they are looking for, right? What would you look for if you were a beginner, right? So that's one way to empathize. That's one good way to empathize, right? In many cases, for example, even in my experience, I used to work for a company which used to make a lot of hospital equipment, and we actually went into an operation theater and looked at doctors performing surgery, right? Just to look at how they reached out for the scissors, how they reached out for a particular instrument, right? Because whatever product we design, we need to think about how it is going to get used in the field, right? So the more information we have about its potential usage area, the more, the better we can adapt the product to meet that particular requirement, right? We can also do more focus group interactions, get a bunch of people who are potential users to come in and ask them about their expectations from a particular product or the shortcomings that they face in an existing product, right? How do they solve that problem today? What are the challenges that they face in terms of solving that problem today, right? And how can we change that? How can we, what would they expect in a solution that would solve that problem for them, right? Sometimes we look, we take that approach. In many cases, another very popular approach is something called a video and photo log analysis, where you ask a group of subjects essentially to go in and take, photos of whatever they are doing, right? If they are going out and say, for example, they want to understand what their diet is about, right? So just go and ask them to go about, and every time they're having some food, just take a photo of that, right? So that kind of creates essentially a logbook of whatever they are eating, right? And you can do that exercise for 5 days, for 7 days, or for whatever period you feel like. And that starts to give you a lot of feedback about what the user is doing unconsciously, or what a potential consumer is doing subconsciously, right? And they may not be able to express that explicitly when you bring them into focus groups, right? So that's where video and photo log analysis kind of helps, right? And these are all part of qualitative analysis. When you look at rather than asking your test subjects about yes no questions, you can also ask them to describe interactions, talk about anecdotes, talk about writing a little bit, a few more words about their experiences. And the choice of words, right, the manner of expression, the logic, that kind of gives you insights about doing some consistent, looking if there are some consistent features that stand out. And this is where qualitative analysis helps quite a bit, right? You can ask your users or your potential users to create a journey map, or you can create a journey map for them, right? You can ask them about what would they do typically, right? How would they go about their grocery shopping process, right? If they were to go out shopping, when do they create the list of items that they need to buy? How do they record it? When do they usually prefer going to the grocery store? Do they want help? Do they usually go there with company? Do they want to go there alone, right? How do they pick up the best items, or what do they think about when they are picking up a particular item? Are they sticking to their grocery list, or are they buying things? Are they just picking up things because they think that they are going to make something, or they have a recipe in mind, right? Or they suddenly thought about a guest who could be visiting, right? So these all become part of the journey map, right? How did the consumer, or how did the user go about solving the process in this current state, right? You can do a lot of mood mapping as well, right? In terms of when a particular person is using your service, what mood are they likely to be in, right? For example, if you are calling up the call center of your service provider, right? Because your internet has crapped out, right? You're not getting service properly. You are likely to be in a very agitated mood, right? So if you were designing the consumer service product, right, you have to understand that the person who's calling in is going to be agitated, is going to be extremely angry, is going to be extremely frustrated, and yet you have to create a product which manages these moods, right? In many cases, the smart lighting application that we talked about, typically it is used as comfort and convenience. So typically that application is likely to be used in single person families, right? People staying alone, coming back after a long day at work, right? And they may enjoy this kind of a mood lighting or a smart lighting application, right? So you have to understand what your consumers are experiencing, right, in order to start incorporating them in your product itself, right? You can do a lot of anecdote analysis. You can do what, why, how, why, when method, right? Trying to write down when a problem was faced, how was it resolved, why was a particular vendor chosen to provide that particular service, right? Or you can start going deeper down into a root cause analysis as to why did the problem arise, right? What were the underlying causes? Why did each of those underlying causes, which of them were incidental to the problems and which of them were pertinent to the problem? You can do another why analysis on that to dig deeper and deeper until you get to what is the real root cause, what is the real need for that particular product, right? So there are multiple tools and technologies and methodologies that are available in order to run this kind of empathizing study on your customer segment, right? And it's and we strongly recommend that if you are building a product, start thinking about your product from your consumer's perspective, from your customer's perspective, from day one itself, right? That's the only way you get to your product starts to develop those features from day one itself, right? So empathizing is definitely the first step towards design, the first step in the design thinking process. And this step is a very powerful step, because what you get out of this, the notes and the data that you collect out of this process is, is used time and again, not only in the product design state, it is also going to be used when you design your interactions. It is going to be used when you create your sales, your customer persona for your sales team. It is going to help you write the scripts for your customer satisfaction, for your customer service team as well, right? So you do this exercise once, and you have multiple avenues or multiple channels where you can leverage the learnings from this exercise, right? So that's step one. Step two comes about with the define phase, because now that you have a lot of data about your potential consumer, your potential customer, right? You can start thinking about creating customer map. You can create an empathy map, right? What do your consumers think and feel, right? What do they see? What do they hear? What do they say and do? What are their digital habits, right? So this is essentially trying to understand the context that the user is bringing in consciously and subconsciously when you interacting with your product, right? So that is going to decide whether they like your product or they kind of give it a 1-star rating out of rage, right? So that is very important, right? It also allows you to create a point of view, right? You can have different consumer segments. It allows you to figure out if what you thought of as a single consumer segment is differentiated into finer groups, into smaller groups, each with its own point of view, and if there are fundamental differences in terms of how they are going to approach your product, right? In which case you may have to prioritize building the product for one subcategory as opposed to other, and that's often a better approach than to create a product that sends out mixed signals and does not solve the problems of either category. When you are building your first product, it is very important to address the needs of your primary segment or sub-segment, right? So this is where the point of view really helps. You can create affinity diagrams, right? Where you take down your notes and start clustering them together in groups which are logically similar, right? And if you are using post-it notes to do this kind of affinity diagrams, what you see is that these clusters tend to evolve naturally, right? You can start to see patterns and commonalities within these groups, and affinity diagram is definitely a great way to go about it, right? Collaborative visualization, probably an extension of the affinity diagram itself, is another technology that is used very effectively in terms of creating this kind of user interaction maps, right? You get a number of people to come in and start contributing on the visualization simultaneously, right? And the more people who come in, they start taking a systems approach to the problem, right? What you will end up seeing is some core, what will come out of a collaborative visualization is that you will end up with, a bunch of almost like a graph, right, with a bunch of nodes and a bunch of links, right? So the links kind of represent your process, and the nodes kind of represent your products, right? So that kind of helps you understand if your product should be built out as one big monolithic block, or it should be several components that are connected by services, right? In that way, it allows you to probably have a decoupled approach to selling the product, right? So rather than selling, say for example, selling a complete PC, if I were to make all-in-one box, a monitor, a keyboard, mouse, right, and sell them separately, I can of course combine it together into a package, but just by separating out or segregating out these three different product categories, I may be able to sell to a larger audience base, or to two or three other subsegments that I did not think of earlier, right? So that's where collaborative visualization definitely helps you understand the product services map as well, right? It definitely helps you narrow down on the problem statement itself, right? It definitely helps you understand, what all it really brings down. It allows you to articulate the need in the problem, in whatever product you're trying to build, right? What problem are you solving? What need are you fulfilling for the customer segment? And remember, whenever you build a product to solve a need, it is going to have much more value than solving for a particular use case, right? Personal development I covered, right? Utility realization, right? As you work out in terms of what is the problem that you are solving, it also helps you understand what's the utility of this solution, right? How important is this problem to the consumer segment or to the customer segment I'm going after, right? Is it very important? Is it like hunger, which must be solved? Is it like shelter, which must be solved? Or is it something that is lower down in my end user's priority list, right? Is it something that they're fine with the way things are happening now, right? Or is it something that they feel really bothered about, right? And this is where data insights also come in and become very, very handy. So if you are planning to set up a data sciences company, right? So look for the product management teams which are going through their defined phases, and that's an excellent place to sell data insights. Right? So that kind of covers the second step of the design thinking process, right? Where you now, at the end of this process, what you have is a better sense of the problem, of the real problem that you are solving, how large that market is, what is the utility of that solution to your customer segment, and then you start thinking about how do I solve this particular problem, right? If the utility of the solution is low for the consumer, is it worth spending a lot of R&D dollars to create a complex solution, right? Maybe you might have to relook at the kind of solutions you build in order to fit in with the utility potential of a particular solution, right? And this is where you get into the ideation phase, right? Where you are looking at to come up with many, many different ways of solving the same problem, right? Of solving that problem that you have identified. And, the ideation processes, it's a matter of practice. There are, again, a bunch of tools that are available for ideation, but unless you practice it, unless you go through this exercise day in and day out, these practices do not become natural, right? Of course, there's brainstorming. We all know about brainstorming. We have heard about it. It's a process that is meant to really put your neurons on steroids and get as many ideas as quickly as possible without critiquing any of the solution, right? So typically brainstorming, there are several methods, there are several techniques for brainstorming, including guided brainstormings, or you can have a talking stick and pass it around. So that's a passing method, right? You can have a facilitated brainstorming where ideas that are not that have been dropped in a first stage are brought back by the facilitator, and that kind of leads you into a very iterative brainstorming process. You can have an upvote or add kind of a methodology, right? Every member gets to either upvote something that is on the table already, right? Giving more traction to ideas that have already been expressed, or adding something that is new, right? So typically, that tells you which of these ideas are floating up, right? There's also a method called reverse brainstorming, in which case we try to figure out what are the worst solutions that we should avoid building. Right? So rather than building for what are the features we should build, we brainstorm for what are the features we should definitely not build, right? So that may also help us reduce our search space in terms of what features to build into our solution, right? Provocation is another method, right? In the provocation method, we actually try to provoke the participants in terms of saying, questioning them in terms of whatever approach that they are taking, and that may lead to some solutions which are completely out of the box, right? Storyboarding is another great way, right? Tell a story about, which describes the scenario of a usage scenario, how a user would use your product, right? They were facing a problem, and how would they go about solving that, right? So storyboarding kind of gives you a very end-to-end, as a very seamless end-to-end kind of an approach, and you can ask different participants to add on elements to the storyboard that is being created, so that you have everybody's buy-in on that particular idea. Right, role plays are great examples of ideating, right? Where if you are building a solution, and if you have multiple people in the group, right, playing the roles of all the external stakeholders in your service, right? Whether it is a distributor, whether it is a retailer, a franchise, an end customer, a child who approaches who accompanies your end customer to the storeroom, right? So if you bring in these roles onto the table and get them to role play, the interactions may reveal new aspects about your service that you have not thought about yet, right? And that kind of brings in more ideas to the table, right? Remember, in creative thinking, the name of the game is really to bring out as many ideas as possible, right? With critical thinking, we try to cut down, we try to find solutions as quickly as possible. But with creative thinking, the objective is to have as many different ways of solving the problem as possible, right? There's random word associations. What do you associate with the product? And this kind of tells us this is a great exercise when it comes to branding, towards doing marketing exercises, right? What does the word mean for you, right? Because if you do not get the right association, then you will end up spending a lot of money in forcing that association, right? For example, in India, right, if you have Naukri.com, everybody knows what Naukri is for, right? It is a place, a job portal, right? So there's very little marketing push or marketing dollars that needs to go in order to establish Naukri as a brand, right? Whereas if I were to bring in Indeed or a Monster, right? If we were to introduce these brands, it's very difficult to associate job portal with a Monster, right? Or a job portal with an Indeed, right? So this association has to be forced by spending a lot of marketing dollars, right? Bringing this up in people's recollection all the time, right? So what are the default word association in your logo, in your name, in your product name, right? So this is a really good technique to help come up with good, either when it comes to naming the product or the line of products, right? It's really, really useful, right? We can have design fictions, right? A hypothetical situation where the product is getting used, right? So rather than thinking about a consumer scenario where the product is getting used, you take the product, you take a product-centric approach, you take the product and think about as many situations where this product can get used, right? You can draw analogies, right? Of successful products that have been built, because it allows you to start mapping features and functionalities in that particular app or service line into your product, right? If you are building a new e-commerce app, right, making an analogy to Flipkart or a Walmart or a Amazon, right, talking about being the Amazon of handicrafts, right? So you can start automatically, just by creating that analogy, you can start bringing in a lot of the features and functionalities that have been developed within the Amazon e-commerce platform. You start making natural associations and looking at how those can be incorporated in your product line as well, right? So that's one way of doing analogies, right? You have the 6 thinking hats methodology, right, where you have 6 different roles, right? Your entire team can you can have your team role play as the chief marketing officer, as the chief finance officer, as the chief operations officer, right? And get them to start bringing in their perspective about a particular product, right? Somebody pitches in, how expensive the product is going to be, how much this is going to cost. Marketing team can pitch, the person role playing the marketing team can pitch in their ideas, and then you start to see synergies that would help create a balance between your own team, right, where you find the common agreement, right? And you can also have worst possible idea, right? That's another way to ideate, finding out which ideas to eliminate, right? And there's also a great technique called and also, right, where you kind of add on to whatever is on the table so far, right? So multiple techniques are available, but these are techniques that would need to be practiced in a day in and day out to gain some familiarity with it. Or you can also start finding mentors or coaches who are ideation experts and who can get your team to come together and think about different approaches in terms of building your solution. Right, so that's the third stage of the design thinking methodology, where we ideate on different approaches. Right, at this point, we now have a sense of what we want to build. Right, what are the top ideas that are coming up? So that essentially tells us what are the top features we are going to have in our product. Right, or in the first iteration of the product, say for example. Right. So that gets us into thinking about, now, how do I create a connect between the ideas that we have and the consumer? How do I start getting a feedback? And in order to get feedback, there has to be some kind of prototyping that needs to happen, right? And prototyping happens in different ways. Right, so there are many different ways you can go about it in terms of prototyping. Right, one is, of course, you can start off with something as simple as, say, for example, sketches. Right, just hand-drawn sketches, things that are being drawn. You can definitely it's very quick and dirty. Right, it brings the idea from just your thought process. It brings it onto paper, right? And that's of course a very great, that's probably one of the best ways to start thinking about either a systems approach to it, right? Nodes and lines, right? Draw a graph, draw a box, draw where you want to place different interactions, right? Or what you think of a particular product, right? You can go a step further. You can create animations, right, to explore that idea a little better, right? Or you can probably even go one step further and create a cardboard mock-up, right, or a paper mock-up. So it kinds of gives you a sense of the dimensions of the product, right? Or a scaled model is also a wireframe or a scaled model, right? So these are again things that give you a sense of perspective, right? It tells you if the product is too big, if the product is clumsy, if the product kind of feels right, if it allows you to start getting feedback, right? And without spending a whole lot of money and resources in terms of building out the solution upfront, right? You can create interactive prototypes, right, where which is kind of a mock-up, but you can click through it, but there is no backend, right? The data could all be dummy data, right? But you definitely have interactive interactions that are happening, right? So tools like, say, for example, Figma, right, or even PowerPoint allows you to create links within buttons, and by pressing those links, you can get a feel of what a particular website may look like, or what a mobile app may look like, without developing it in a full-featured way, right? You can also have material prototype, and material prototype is typically if you are thinking about creating a new ensemble, right? If you're creating a new package, so you want to create a package made of earthenware, right? So getting the material gives you a feel about its stretchability, its longevity, its whether it is ductile, whether it is malleable, right? So it kind of gives you a sense of what kind of a material, what will be the touch and feel, what will it feel like in the hands of the consumer, right? Of course, additive manufacturing, 3D printing, right? These are good ways to get almost either a scaled model or even it even gives you the components that are printed out, so you get a sense of what would be the packaging be like, or what the box would look like, right? Things like that. And you can also create service prototypes, right? And service prototypes are what would it, if you were to reimagine a shopping experience using e-commerce, and everybody has used e-commerce, but before e-commerce came about, there were service prototypes. What would it feel like? Would it feel natural for you to open up an app and order your products, right? If take the example of something like an Instamart, right, which says that I'm going to deliver you food in say 5 minutes, right? And so can you actually imagine somebody who's making some food and finds out that they have run out of food? Would they actually trust your product so much so that they are going to place an order and continue cooking, right? Unless you test it out with real users, you cannot figure out if this kind of a service will work or not. So you create service prototypes for that, right? What would that experience be like if you ordered something while you were cooking, and the doorbell rang, and you had to go out and you received the package. You have to cut out through that package and everything and continue cooking, right? What would it feel like? Does it feel natural, or does it feel forced and unnatural? So this is where you create service prototypes, right? You can also create AR/VR prototypes, right? These are more, this could be augmented reality in terms of projections that are made on a surface, right? Or it could be, you could be shown the entire place in VR. Before creating a house, you might want to do a VR, right? Today you see e-commerce portals like a Flipkart, right, allowing you to place a product in your home, right, before you purchase it, right? It allows you to see what that product would feel like in your surroundings, right? And these are essentially VR prototypes, right? So at the end of this stage, what you have is something to touch and feel, right? You have a clearer definition, right, in terms of what would be the consumer experience be like, right? And at this stage, you have to take it back to the consumers, right, and ask them, how are you going to test this out, right? How are you going to figure out if this is working with them, right? Whether the concept that you are pitching, right, does it feel natural or not? Does is the concept itself is the concept itself worthy of taking the discussion further, right? Or you could be doing an A/B testing where you have two different variants and you ask your consumers what they like, right? It could be a color option, it could be a product feature, it could be a particular design, right? It could be any of these things, and you could be running an A/B testing on two groups, trying to get a sense of where people are gravitating towards, right? You could do blind reviews, right? You could give out your product without telling people that it is your product, right? It is masqueraded, and you have competitor products as well, right? So that you get a sense of what is the feedback. This is typically used when you are trying to do some kind of a taste, or when you're trying to get feedback on the taste of a particular product, or a fragrance, or even some kind of a mobile app, an API service, right? Which people do not know what API is getting used. You can do blind reviews for that to get a sense of whether they feel that there is a speed difference. They feel that it's relatively making their experience better, right? So you can definitely do that. Then there is usability testing, right? You have built the product with certain features and functionalities in mind, right? But it's only when the feature, it goes to the end user, that they get a sense of whether that is usable or not, right? Whether the way you have put your battery changers or the charging port, right? Is it feeling natural or not, right? So this is where you get into usability testing. Are the users finding it easy to do the thing that they wanted to do, or are they having to go about, are they facing difficulties in terms of a natural perception of how to use that product? And here again, you get into user journeys. Here again, you go through the same questions of trying to understand what was the user's experience, right? Which parts in your app did they click? Which parts did they not click? Which parts did they not scroll down to, right? And you can do that by surveys. You can do that by, even by placebo testing, right? Where you give a bunch of people your solution and a bunch of other people, not your solution, or a placebo, right? And see if there is a perceptible difference, if there is a positive reaction coming from those who actually used your product, or is it they are giving you those ratings and those rankings because they are getting paid or whatever, right? So again, contextual inquiry, another way to test, right? Not just in isolation, where you ask them to use a product just in the product itself, but you ask them to use that product when they are commuting. You ask them to use the product when they are waking up, when they're still in bed, right? So this is how you can create some context around testing your product, and you want to test. You want to see if the product is getting more acceptance under certain contexts, right? So it's not an issue with the product, but if a person is more likely to, or your end user is more likely to use your product when they are presented, when they find themselves in some situations, right? And testing allows you to understand the expectation gap. What is it that the customers or the users wanted from your solution, and when they actually used when they used your prototype, what gaps did they discover, or what gaps did they feel were solved, and which gaps opened up, right? It's going to be an iterative process, so don't worry about that, right? You can also do task analysis. Look at how a user is using your product, right? Break down that entire interaction into smaller tasks, and look at if there is one subtask which is problematic, right? Or that entire workflow is problematic, right? So testing allows you to get a sense of whether the product that you have spent so much time and effort building, whether there's going to be mass acceptance for that, or whether your target segment is going to accept that particular product or not, right? And design thinking, we talked about these 5 steps of empathizing, defining, ideating, prototyping, testing, right? But you have to understand that design thinking is not at all a linear process. The lines are completely blurred between each of those steps. What it looks like is more like this, right? Where one step leads to new findings, which causes us to go back and relook at the solution itself. It opens up new avenues, right? We have to scratch a lot of ideas that we have picked up. We create a prototype, and then we drop that entire thing and start off with something completely new, right? So it's only when you go through this process that you get a sense of where your product is, and that is when you are ready to implement your particular product, right? That is where you are in a position to implement, and you go about creating it, right? And when you implement the product, you are essentially trying to create a differentiator in your feature. As we started discussing by saying that it is possible to create a generic product, but the generic product, there isn't enough of a market, of an entry barrier, so others can also come in and compete. But with design thinking, what ends up happening is you have identified a specific way of solving a problem, and it is easier to get IP, to create intellectual property based on a design thinking approach, because your conclusions are more likely to be novel, right? It's more likely to get patented, right? So that's where you go about into the implementation stage, right? And you actually make a product out of it. So let me take an example of a water bottle on Amazon, right? If I take a water bottle, if I go and search for water bottles on Amazon, like me, there are millions of people who are going on Amazon and searching for a water bottle, right? What I will find is that people are looking at this water bottle differently. That is why there are many different water bottles that are available on Amazon, right? For example, the first diagram that you see is a stainless steel water bottle, about 700 milliliters, and it is priced at 179 rupees, right? If I scroll down on the special bottle features, right, what I will find is that there are a whole bunch of options that Amazon itself gives me in terms of different features, right? What is the shape? What is the bottle shape? Diamond shaped, oval shaped, rectangular, round, square, right? So there are different bottle shapes by which I can pick. There are different special features. There are different materials, right? There is acrylic, there is ABS, there is ABS plastic, alloy steel, aluminium, there is copper, there is earthenware, glass. So there's a whole bunch of different options on the material itself, right? Because different people are looking for different materials. And then there are special features, whether it is airtight, whether it is leak proof, whether it is insulated, whether it has a straw or not, whether it has a reminder, whether it is IoT enabled, right? So what this tells us that products are not, when you are building a product, there is an entire feature space that you can look at, and there are different categories of consumers who are going to come in and look at products with specific features, right? So as long as you are catering to your customer segment well enough, and you know that your consumers are going to come in and look for IoT enabled water bottles, you are safe, right? You can build a product, you can stand out in that entire crowd, right? So the feature space is large, and there are multiple product variants of the water bottle that are available with different combinations of features, right? Similarly, if I look at the price space, right, I'll have different kinds of water bottles that are available, right? Light from 50 rupees, right? Because the purpose again is to store water, right? Nothing more. These are all water storage water bottles that are available for 800 rupees. There are plastic water bottles that are available for 50 rupees, right? So that entire space in between, you'll have different people offering products at different price points, right? Then you get to companies which are not trying to sell you a water bottle, say for example, right? It's trying to get into the process space, right? Say for example, what it is trying to sell you is the motivation to stay hydrated, right? So here the purpose is not to store water. The purpose is to stay, to help you stay motivated. And here you'll find water bottles which are coming in, which are IoT enabled, which have different gradation, markings and gradings on them, which inspire you to drink more water, or which send you reminders if you are not drinking water itself, right? And finally, you'll find another space, which is the paradigm space, right? Which is not trying to sell you either a water bottle or the motivation to stay hydrated. It's trying to sell you clean water. It's trying to sell you filtered water. It's trying to sell you water plus additives, right? Water plus benefits, right? And there again, you have bottles with ionization, bottles with antibacterial capabilities that are built in, with active filtering that is built in, right? So that's a paradigm space, right? Where you are taking the purpose of a bottle and changing it around, right? So what this effectively tells us is, when we look at creating innovation in a product space, it's not that every idea has to be completely new, that nothing like that has existed before. That's not going to happen. Usually what you will find is a combination of multiple places, right? So either what you are doing is you are introducing a new feature, or you are introducing new markets, or you are introducing new methods, or you are introducing new pricing models for the product that you are building, right? And accordingly, they are called product innovation, right? They're called position innovations, they're called process innovations, or paradigm innovations, right? Paradigm innovations essentially introduce us to new markets. Product innovations introduces us to new features, new features and functionalities, new materials, whatever it is, right? Position innovation gives us that entire pricing and looking at adjacent markets who may also buy the product, right? So essentially, you are moving away from the leaders and trying to find a niche for yourself where your position is more appealing, right? Where your pricing is more appealing, right? Or you can do a process innovation where you're introducing new method itself, right? So if I take the example of product innovation, right? We have multiple examples that we can cite over here, right? For example, if you look at the Tata Swatch water purifier, which was designed to be a low-cost purifier, that is, I think the smallest variants are sub 50 rupees or sub 60 rupees, right? Clean drinking water in most cases. Because India is a country where safe drinking water may not be available publicly, right? So that's a segment they went after, a price-conscious market with a vision of providing safe water to the masses, right? The Ola electric scooter, right? That's a product innovation. That's a new product category that they created because they gained a lot of understanding about the market itself, right? Nest generated its own, it started off this whole IoT thing with its learning thermostats for homeowners, so that it starts to learn about the behavior of the homeowners, understand what the owners prefer, when they prefer the temperature to be higher, when they prefer the temperatures to be lower, right, and reacts to it, right? Impossible Foods, it's an American company that started creating plant-based meat substitutes, right? And completely new product category. Right? So these are examples of new features that have been introduced in the product to create a fundamental impact in the market. Similarly, we can have position innovations as well, right? Volvo has been focusing extensively on safety, and in order to demonstrate that, we find a lot of its ads focusing on safety, right? Focusing on all the airbags that it has, the way it communicates to its consumers. It talks about safety all the time, right? Your kids are going to be safe in the car. It's got multiple airbags. It's got, it's got an automatic assist system. It's got lane changing methods, right? So all the messaging that comes out focuses on safety, right? Similarly, Whole Foods, which is an organic food brand in the US, right? They focus on farmers. They focus on clean, healthy food, naturally grown food without pesticides, right? So that the entire positioning is green. The entire positioning is about sustainability, right? Southwest Airlines, one of the, was probably the first airline that came up with the low-cost airline model, right? Talking about unbundling its services so that the basic ride service was priced lower than full fare or full feature airlines, right? Rolex has typically emphasized on functional luxury, right? Rolex watches did not become expensive from day one, but Rolex watches were engineered to be high performing watches, right? So the initial Rolex that were sold to people with very active lifestyles, people who were climbing mountains, people who were flying aircrafts back in the 30s and 40s, right? So naturally, because of the quality of craftsmanship and the engineering manpower that was required to produce these watches, naturally they became expensive, and over time, with cheaper watches coming into the market, Rolex started to become more of a luxurious watch, right? But it is still functional. It positions itself as a functional watch, all right? So that's why Rolex has an emphasis on functional luxury, right? Several process innovation examples as well, right, that I can talk about, right? When we talk about these process innovation examples, we look at, Aadhaar as the biometric identification system that has been brought up, right? It's tremendously simplifies KYC requirements. It tremendously simplifies our reliance on single sign-on methods that are created by MNCs, right? It allows us to have identity integrated into point of sales. It brings in transparency in the way transactions are created, right? So it's a massive, the process of getting signatures which could have been forged and all, right, that kind of goes away with an Aadhaar-based system. So it's a fundamental change in the process of identifying somebody, right? Similarly, IRCTC's railway booking management, just imagine how many railway stations we have in India from where bookings could be made, right? And communicating that information in real time across the country was not easy, right? So when IRCTC launched its reservation portal, right, it's a massive achievement in the way people could go about and book a train ticket. And we do book probably, we have one of the largest number of bookings of train tickets in the world, right? So clearly a system that is designed to solve that problem, make it easier to do that booking, right? It's going to be appreciated, right? Swiggy Genie, right? It created a document delivery service. Cheap, it can be overlaid with other services, and it is making it easier for documents to be moved to move around within a city or within city limits, right? Saving a lot of people a lot of time, right? And that's why it's a process innovation, right? Just Dial, when it came into the market, it brought in a lot of process innovation, because I could just pick up my phone and call a number and ask them about pretty much anything that I wanted, and I would have the service providers call me and let me know what they can do for me, right? So that's an incredible discovery platform that simplified getting work done, right? So multiple examples that we see even in India in terms of process innovation, right? And if I were to look at the final piece of this puzzle, right, we get into a lot of these paradigm innovations, right? And large companies have typically innovated multiple times, right? For example, Amazon brought about a fundamental change in the way we do our shopping itself, right? So it kind of brought in that entire e-commerce paradigm, and what started off as servers to manage its e-commerce platform, it started developing those technologies so that it could start renting out those spaces, right? Those servers, and essentially birthed up cloud computing, took it mainstream, right? So most of these large companies, what you'll find is that they have had at least one paradigm innovation for them to be able to grow so fast and grow so big, right? Facebook has brought in social media. It got social media mainstream, right? Even though there was Orkut and other platforms before that, but by integrating digital media with personalized information and an always on connectivity, right? It kind of got social media mainstream. And now the other thing that it is looking at is essentially creating a virtual platform, a virtual reality platform like Meta, investing a lot of resources in terms of creating about this change in terms of how we interact and how we work with our co-workers, right? Creating virtual workspaces, virtual offices where people can come in and work as if they were together, right? So that it's an approach that solves the lack of culture in a remote workspace, and also gives them the flexibility of working remotely. So it's kind of a sweet spot in between, right? Google, when it came in, it revolutionized the way we searched for information on the internet, right? Shortly thereafter, it brought in and made email as not only a free service. Hotmail probably was the first which made email free, but Gmail came in and gave you like 10 megabytes of data, unheard of in those times, right? And made a huge amount of email possible, right? So with that email, that's become a very fundamental credential to all of us today, right? All of our phones are, a lot of our social profiles are linked to our emails, right? Which is why it's become very fundamental, right? Apple brought in personal computing, it brought in smartphones, right? Revolutionizing the way we think about about interacting with the internet, about how we got online, just by creating a smartphone with a touchscreen, right? And making that entire surface of the phone screen a gateway to the internet, right? It was able to pretty much create a revolution and put a phone in pretty much everybody's hand. Not an iPhone, but it created the need for everybody to have a phone, right? Let me put it that way, right? Similarly, when Bitcoin came in, it brought in a paradigm of blockchain which solves fundamental trust issues, right? It is a paradigm change to existing trust systems like courts and police and all of that, enforcement technologies, right? It can replace them. What is coming up now is ChatGPT and generative AI, right? And these are, again, areas where we are seeing a lot of copywriting work getting done out of ChatGPT. We are starting to see a fundamental change in the way we think about tasks and the way we assign time to tasks themselves, right? So that's another revolution that is coming in, right? So in summary, while your innovation design can be in multiple ways, right? While your innovation design could be in terms of your product or your position or your process or your paradigm, what the most likely path is a mix of all of this, right? So when you talk about structured innovation design, it is about understanding that there are a lot of methodologies that are available in order to do creative thought processes. There are formal methods, there are critical thinking methods as well to allow you to meet specifications. Merging both of them allows you to create solutions which meet functional goals and provide the personal connect, the personal connect with the audience, right, for them to adopt your product. So your product is going to find its own niche. It's going to find its own sweet spot somewhere in between. It's going to have some new features. It's going to have some new pricing differentials. It's going to have some new processes, right? And your innovation is really a combination of all of them, right? And that's the thought that I'm going to leave you all with today. I'm going to hand over to Vinod sir to probably talk a little bit about the incubation center, right? About AICPSU, the facilities that it offers for young innovators to pitch their ideas and get incubated either in person or virtually. What are the support services that they offer? How can they help you scale up your idea into a company, right? So over to you, Vinod sir.
Thank you, Atanu sir. So good evening, everyone. So it was a great session. So talking about the different kinds of innovation and then how to ideate, how to develop a prototype. So we at Atal Incubation Center, the Anand Sagar University, we are supporting almost 35 plus startups today. So they are in different verticals like healthcare, mobility, waste management, so which are our focus verticals. So we are supported by Niti Aayog, Government of India. The different support services for our incubators are we provide them infrastructure and then we provide them innovation labs. So wherein we have associated with different kinds of corporates, large corporates like Autodesk, Bosch, Rexroth, Intel, Nvidia, IBM, VMware, so many other corporates. So our incubators can get to learn about these technologies and they can implement in their innovations as well. And along with that, we provide a lot of mentoring support. So wherein we have experts, including Atanu sir and then many other experts from different functional areas and different industries. So who can help our incubators with different strategic directions so that they can grow their business as well. And along with that, we also have a component of seed fund support. So wherein we can actually give money to promising startups. So this is as a loan or maybe against equity. So if in the audience, if there are startups which are showing traction, so you can reach out to me and then I'll be more than happy to tell you the different guidelines that we have for seed fund investment. So in addition, we also work with a number of corporates through their CSR initiatives. So and we provide help in areas of UI, UX design and then marketing, app development, software development, all of this, which will be available free of cost for our incubators. So incubation, we have classified as physical incubation and virtual incubation. Basically, physical incubation is wherein incubators come to our facility, they work from there. So we provide them office space, whereas virtual incubators are pan-India. So they don't have to come to our facility, rather they avail other services that are available with us. So except for the office space, all the other services are available. So you can actually opt for either physical incubation if you are based out of Bangalore, or you can opt for virtual incubation if you are based outside of Bangalore. So with this, I would like to just conclude my few words about our incubation center and hand over to Atanu sir for final words.
Thank you, Vinod sir. Probably a couple of things. If there are any questions about the discussion about the incubation, right? We'll be happy to take those questions. Probably you can drop off the incubator email ID in the chat itself. Right, you can let people know where to post their questions, where to approach if they are looking for incubation. And in the meanwhile, if there's anybody in the audience, right, I would be happy to take questions. Right, so if there are no further questions, then I am hearing from a few participants who said that they did not receive a certificate. I believe that the link will be posted on the group. If you are part of the WhatsApp group, I will strongly encourage you to join the WhatsApp group as well, right? So that you have the attendance form and everything is shared over there. For those of you who are joining us on YouTube, you can also put in your questions on YouTube. The certificate link is, I think it is posted in the description box as well. That is what I'm told by my team. So you may want to scan the code and join the group as well, right? So that you can have a lot of follow-up questions. And if there are no other follow-up questions, then we'll go forward. Then we'll go ahead and close today's discussion.